us on the mic, talking life and what's alike. Middle age, it's quite the ride, finding joy and chasing pride. Career dreams and daily grind, funny moments that we find. Letting go of yesterday, making paths along the way. Middle age.
What's going on, Tim?
Hey, Trav. Good to see you.
Good to see you, buddy. I'm excited to keep going with season 2 here, man.
Yeah, I'm glad you're happy.
You say that with shock and pleasant surprise. I like it.
It makes me feel good. That's great, Trav. I like to see you smile. So let's dive in, man. Do you want to give the intro?
Yeah, man. Hey, everybody. It's so good to have you back, or for those of us just joining for the first time, welcome. Just as a reminder, the Tim and Trav podcast is basically about life in our 40s and transitions and everything in between. And this season, we are focusing on unique passions, and we have a really cool one. We've been blessed so far with season 2 and a lot of really cool different guests. Tim's done a really good job of finding really interesting people. And today's guest is Randy Anderson, and we'll get into that in his guest segment soon here in a minute. But just a super, super cool lineup today, so I'm excited.
I agree with you.
Tim, our
great.
couples card game.
Yeah, let's do this. I love couples card games.
It's your new favorite thing. A movie you've seen that you wish you either wrote or acted in, or maybe both.
Ooh, what a good question. You know what's funny about couples card game is I only play it with you. And I may mention that every week, but I've never played couples card game with my real life couple, Christy. But maybe I'll ask her these questions later.
You know, I haven't played with Kristen either. Yeah, maybe we'll log off and actually have couples time.
Yeah. Maybe the two of us should stop talking to each other. So I thought about this, and mine are like polar opposites, and I have to give two because I think they kind of maybe symbolize the way my head works every once in a while, just the way I look at the world. But I had to look at a comedy, and then I had to look at more of a drama, right? I just had to bounce between the two, and there's so many out there. I'm truthfully, I'm not a huge movie guy. I don't watch a ton of movies. If I start watching movies, I usually fall asleep. I have a ton of respect for and it's not because of the movie. It's just because of me, right? I have a ton of respect for the people in that industry and the work that's done, and I know you've been in that space, Trav. So I was thinking about this, and from a comedy perspective, the first place I went to, and I had to Google this because I was like, I don't really have a favorite that just comes to mind, but I Googled best, top comedies, and the one that jumped out at me was Airplane. I just thought that the humor in that movie was just so funny. And I got such a kick out of that movie, so I was going to throw that out there. Leslie Nielsen's just kind of a funny actor in general in his stuff. And then, if I had to pull back and look at something a little bit more serious, I think, I remember this specifically in high school, Shawshank Redemption was by far my favorite movie. It's an incredible film. I actually have seen that one several times, but just the characters, that would be one that, gosh, I wish I wrote that movie, because I'd like to star in Airplane and write Shawshank Redemption. So I don't know if you can draw that line or not, but both very good films for their own reasons, and I wanted to share that with you. So what do you got? So
I have to ask a quick question. Shawshank Redemption, first of all, it was shot in Ohio, which a lot of people don't know. It's shot at a prison in Ohio. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. The other thing is, did you know that that's probably, if you pressed me on the question, that's probably my all-time favorite movie?
Did I steal your answer?
No, you did not, actually.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, that's funny you say that.
That is funny, Trev. That's cool.
Great answers.
Thank you.
So mine's a little bit off the wall. I have this very distinct feeling. I'm a little bit different from you in that I really enjoy watching film. I love going to the movies. I tend to do it whenever I can in terms of watching movies and consuming that stuff. Full disclosure for those of you who don't know, I work in television and film as my day job, so I kind of have an affinity for it just in general. But the one that really gets me, where I remember very vividly walking out of a theater in LA going, man, I wish I wrote that, is a movie called Crazy Stupid Love. And it was written by a guy named Dan Fogelman, who I actually ended up working for on a pilot at one point, who's and luckily, you know, they always say don't mute your heroes, but he's a super cool dude. But yeah, it's one of those where it's not overly complicated. It's not what I would consider, like, most people are going to put Shawshank Redemption like up in like high cinematic art, right? Like from the way it's shot to directed to acted, written, you know, like it kind of checks all the boxes, right? Well, Crazy Stupid Love to me kind of is under that radar, but it's so good. And I've tried my hand at writing romantic comedies and it never goes well. And the fact that it was done so well and acted so well, I was just like, I wish I wrote that. Like, it was just good. It was smart. There were really good moments in it. It's funny. It's simple. Like, it checks all those boxes for me in terms of good content. And I was just like, ah. And I remember walking out of the arc like, going, damn, I wish I wrote that.
It's that good, huh?
You know, it's good. It's like, it's probably never going to win an Oscar or anything like that in any race, but that's okay. Like, to me, it was just really good entertainment, and it was really well written, and it's funny, you know, like that's a really hard thing to do.
Who's in that movie?
It's Steve Carell and,
really?
yeah, there's actually, there's a lot of people in it. Steve Carell, and then, who's the guy that everybody loves, and don't say Tim Cummings. Ryan Gosling is your guy. Emma Stone. Okay. You know,
I'm gonna have to check that out, Trav. I'm sure I'll just have to, you know, have a cup of coffee before I start it.
There you go.
Yeah. So, that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Listener comments. Now that we're rolling on season 2, we have some comments. Yeah, you want to go for it?
Got some comments. Yeah. So some came in via text. I got one actually. Coincidentally, who would have thought, this came in from Isaac's wife, Allie, who's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
She wrote in that she loved the show. You know, that was probably the right thing to say, given that we featured her husband. And I know how much he loves her as well. So they're just an awesome couple. But she loved the show, and she mentioned how much she loved the intro song, too. So great job writing that, Trav. That was really...
you're going to get me in so much trouble. Yeah. No, I did not write it, but yeah.
So that was an awesome comment from Allie. Thank you, Allie.
Thank you, Allie. I have one. We actually got a few of them, and Jeff Dean. I'm going to read it real quick because it cracks me up, and he wrote it really well. Jeff wrote, so interestingly enough, even though I am Trav's cousin, Tim, this is for you. You wanted a funny story about Trav, and you may have known him long enough to witness or know this story, but I had to share. Last season, he's meaning our season, was a little focused on your dog, but do you know the story of Travis's family cat that used to jump on his face? That cat would stalk him while he was not paying attention, watching TV in particular, then boom, cat on the face. He can tell you more, but know your struggle with pets is not unique, and don't let him fool you. He was ever at one with his pets. So there you go.
Thank you, Jeff.
That cat's name was Magic. I hated that cat. And that cat also, not only did it jump on my head, but it also, it would close its eyes at night and walk up to me in the backyard. And then right as it was like inches from my face, open its eyes and scare the living daylights out of like 2-year-old Travis. So yeah,
come on.
Magic, rest his soul, was not my favorite.
Did Magic must have come before Patches?
Magic was before Patches, yes. Yeah. Patches, I know you loved.
Oh my gosh,
Patches.
I don't think I ever knew about Magic. This is great information.
No, Magic probably passed when I was, I don't know, 3 or 4, something like that. Was not around forever, but long enough. Well, I'll say this. He lived long enough to make an impression on me that I remember. So he had to have lived, fairly far into my life.
I wonder how many people own cats that can walk around with their eyes closed.
I don't know.
That's very interesting. That's the first cat I've ever heard of that could do that.
Yeah, jump on my head and back then I had like a head full of curls too, so
sure,
it
hurt.
You
had nice hair. Yeah. Wow, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing that. That gives me great material for future episodes, which I need, and I'm very grateful for. Trav is very. It's hard to find faults with Trav, but now I think I got something to work on. So thank you, Jeff.
Just ask my family; they'll tell you.
That's not true. So I have another really cool comment that I have to share. This came from a listener, Matt, who's a guy in the community, really, really cool dude. he actually sent me a screenshot. It was funny. He was driving on his way to a soccer game, I think, for one of his kids, and he said, best like driving podcast or something like that. It was a screenshot of our image, from the last episode on his screen on his car. But Matt, the thing that really struck me about Matt, he said he loved the episode, but I think the thing that was really, really cool was he said he wants to start going now to the astronomy club that Isaac hosts.
Hey, all right.
And I was really stoked to hear that. I thought that was such awesome information in terms of, just getting the word out there about great things that are going on, one of our goals. And I just wanted to thank Matt for writing in and sharing that. So that was awesome.
That's cool. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to round us out with one more comment. This is from Nancy Gates, for longtime listener. Nancy Gates, Mama Gates. She said, "Love the new focus!" ! And Tim, neither Rob nor I are from Pluto. LOL. You're lucky she included that LOL. Otherwise, I'd watch your back. At least she thought it was funny.
It's a good thing I'm in New Jersey and they're in Ohio. I appreciate. I never felt that way about your mother. Your father, however, I still question. His originating existence and where he may have come from. I think there's still a pretty good chance that there's something worth looking into there. And I don't mean that. It's not a slam on him. I just he could be an alien. That's all I want to say.
Well, all right. I'll send him your mailing address, and we'll go from there.
This will be my last episode, everybody.
Yeah.
It's been fun, Trav.
Love, of course.
Yeah. All right.
Folks,
those are great comments.
Yeah. Thanks so much for writing in, everybody. If you have a question, comment, concern, etc., something from Tim's past would be great. Tim and Trav podcast @gmail.com. We'll put it in the show notes too, but feel free to send us a note. We may not read every one of them on air, but we will definitely read all of them. So thank you very much. Tim, awesome wife moment?
Yeah, awesome wife moment. So this just happened recently. I had asked Nolan, our middle child, to grind some coffee beans for me. Okay, so Nolan, I've had Connor do this in the past, but we buy our coffee beans, a big bag of them from Costco, of course. All right, there you go. Thank you, Costco. and they need to be ground. So every 5 or 6 days we grind them and store them and drink the coffee, obviously. So Nolan is a great little dude, and Nolan and Connor are very different little guys. And Nolan starts doing it, and he's sort of pouring it. The grinder's small, so it's only going to do so much, and he's pouring it in, and it's just making like an absurd mess, right? And this is all me, man. I have a problem with messes that I have to work on, and I have to calm down but I'm watching him sort of from afar. And at one point, he goes to dump the bag over, and the stuff just spills everywhere, and I am not proud of this moment, but I was like, Nolan, I got upset. And it was wrong, right? It was 100% wrong. Like it was the way I felt in the moment, but it was not the right response. The guy was trying to help me out. He was doing a favor, and it just didn't go as planned. So I had to back up for a minute, but the only way that I was able to back up was because Christy looked at me. And she was like, "You got to calm down, man." Like she right in my face. She was like, "Tim, chill, chill," And it wasn't, it was just authentic. Like it wasn't demeaning. It was respectful. It was true. It was accurate. And she's like, just take a step back. And this is such a little thing. It really is, right? Nobody was at risk of getting hurt or anything like that. But sure. I think the thing that I really admire and respect about her in that moment was her, she was willing to address an issue of me being an idiot, and she did it kindly, and she was 100% right. And when it was all said and done, I stepped back and I was like, Nolan, I'm sorry, dude. Like I definitely overreacted. That was my fault. I should not have done that. I thanked him for his help, but I just am grateful to have a partner who, when things get a little rough and when I get turn into a bit of a maniac, she's willing to say, Tim, why don't you calm down a little bit? And that's needed. We all need people like that in our life. And I'm grateful that I married one.
Yeah, for sure. The way that she does it, you know what I mean? That matters almost as much as doing it. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, man. That the delivery and the approach is very important. So, so thank you to Christy for keeping me in line and
It's a
again,
full-time job.
exactly.
That's
How about
cool.
yourself?
Well, okay, so I have to preface this with the fact that you and I don't talk about these before we record. That's kind of been our whole plan the whole time.
Correct.
But what's interesting is now you're 2 for 2 because you did the Shawshank thing and now this, and I
Wow.
think you'll see the connection here. Kristen is human just like the rest of us, and as awesome as she slips up every once in a while because we all make mistakes, and she has done a really good job, and it kind of came to light. It's a very rare moment when she makes a mistake where she, should apologize or whatever. Like, she's a great parent. She's a great mom, and she keeps her cool. I think you and I are probably more in line in that sense of like, hey, like, chill out. You know what I mean? Like, don't get so upset about the mess. I think you and I are probably more aligned like that. But, the other day, it was the tail end of the day. We'd just, it's a long day. We'd had a lot of just inside time with the kids, and it's the dog days of winter, and it's like, oh my gosh. And we were all just a little bit spent. And she snapped at our son, Elliot, a little bit. I mean, it was not bad. It was not like she didn't yell. It wasn't, anything crazy. But she knew that it was a bit of an overstep. Like she knew it instantly, like she, as a human, she just was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And the thing about it was, I noticed in the moment there was, first of all, she gave herself grace in allowing herself to be human. You know what I mean? Like, hey, that's just part of it. Like, we're not going to be perfect all the time.
Yeah.
And so she immediately kind of checked herself, and then she immediately apologized. And I think one of the things that she has taught me over the years, especially as a parent, is that you can apologize to a child, even though you are the parent or you are the adult. It doesn't necessarily exonerate your actions, but it definitely teaches kids that, hey, nobody's perfect, including adults. We don't have all this figured out. We are going to lose our temper every now and then. This is part of life, and it's okay to apologize. It's not, some huge deal to admit fault.
Yeah.
And it made me realize in that moment, it's like, wow, that was actually multifaceted there in showing your human side, in showing, that you can make mistakes and apologizing for mistakes. I just thought it was a great moment of actual humanity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, I love that. Yeah, I think that's great. It is funny, the kind of the overlap between the two stories too. That's funny.
yeah, we're living the same life. I hope that's okay.
I'm fine with that. Yeah. So cool. What do you got for, you got anything awesome that you've seen, read, experienced recently?
So Tim, I got to be honest with you. You and I have recorded 4 of these now. This is our 4th for season 2. And I honestly, given it is right now, it's early February 2025, and I'm going to surrender to the fact that I need to do a better job of trying to look for more positive things. I don't have anything. I need to put my phone down probably. I need to stop reading everything that comes across my dashboard and just take a breath. And, maybe after we record this, my awesome thing is literally just going to go out and touch some grass and take the dog for a walk. I don't have anything awesome, so I'm hoping that you do.
The more you're talking, the more depressed I'm getting right now.
I have that effect on people. Sorry, man. You're the one who wanted to make a podcast with me.
I know. Well, you weren't always this grim. To your point, I think you make a great point there, and I appreciate your, the authenticity of it. It's a complicated time. I do think, and I fall into it as well. I mean, I'm looking online and thinking, oh my gosh, what is going on? And oddly, I find myself I keep going back.
Yeah, right.
Why do I keep looking? It's awful. So, and I hear you. I mean, like to try to be more intentional about finding those things is so important, especially now. Mine's simple, Trav, and I'll just share it, and hopefully it inspires you in some way, and or the listener in what way. And again, really simple. But I heard on the radio the other day. I just thought this was kind of intriguing. It was the X Games, the Extreme Games. I think it was taking place somewhere in Colorado or something like that. And they were talking about how they're using AI now to judge the contestants or the participants. So the people doing the half pipe snowboard twists and turns, obviously that was always human judged previously, but they're now using cameras to like digitally analyze the turns and the twists and the flips and providing scores, through some of that equipment. And it just made me think about, how interesting that is in and of itself, but then what the future of that also looks like, right? Will we be, I love soccer. Will we ultimately be watching soccer games that don't have a referee and that, just have cameras positioned throughout the stadium so that, when a follow occurs, the speakers blare out some noise and it's made clear. I mean, imagine like a basketball game or a baseball game without an umpire. Right. So it's just kind of interesting to think about and see how technology continues to kind of influence different sectors and grow into what it is, which I don't really understand or know what that is. But anyways, that's all I had to share.
Well, that's cool. And it's certainly not going away. You know what I mean?
No.
So the more it can be used for positive things, that's cool. I like that. I think you're right. I do think, especially in sports, I think it's probably more in our future than we may even realize. The minute you said sports, I was like, well, there's a strike zone in baseball. Like that'd be a pretty easy thing, frankly.
And right. I mean, a lot of it's already being used. It's just right. Like you can see all that stuff on when a game is being played, anyways. Or did they cross the end zone in the or get for a touchdown, for instance? Like all of that stuff. The cameras are almost already even in place to totally analyze that data. It's just that a human is still involved. Yeah.
It's wild too to think about like the X Games. I don't know why I immediately thought about the snowboarders, on the half pipe, like all those spins and everything. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, and you think about like what, how much a human can actually even take. I mean, those people obviously are trained and professionals who are doing that. But gosh, when I look at it, I'm like, it's just, I mean, A, it's amazing what those young people are doing. But B, it's like, how do you actually judge that and make sure that you're actually seeing everything? So anyways.
That's cool.
So that's it, Trav. Listen, I look
that's
forward
a good,
to,
awesome thing.
And I bet you're going to have an awesome thing on our next episode. I can't wait to hear it.
I'm going to try. I'm definitely going to try.
All right, cool.
I promise you that. I don't think we have any sponsors, but I tell you, we did two pretty sly ones today. I don't know if you noticed. The Costco one, obviously, that's always there.
Yeah, that's always there.
And you were talking about mess. You keep going back to Dyson. I think you're gonna get it.
When the coffee beans were on the floor, I was like, Nolan, get the Dyson and clean this up. That's terrible, man. The more I talk about this, I'm like, that was so wrong of me.
Hey, you're human. You're allowed to be human.
True.
Right?
This is true. Yeah.
And you have Christy there as a checks and balances. So there you go.
Thank God.
Yeah, right? Seriously.
Yeah. So let's get into this guest of ours. Randy's a really cool dude. As everybody will quickly learn, he is a busy guy, just like everybody else that comes on. And, when he has time on the side, he is a very prolific author in multiple different genres. So his interview, I think, is going to be really, really fascinating. I think, for anybody who tries to create, this will mean something to them. And there's some great takeaways from it. So let's bring him in. We are here with Randy Anderson. Randy, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, it's, you're the first person that said that, so we definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
So check in with me at the end of the podcast.
Yeah.
We got time.
Yeah, let's see how far how long we can keep you with us here. So, Randy, this is very cool. You have some really awesome things to share with us today, I know, but we always start, as part of this season, just hearing a little bit more about, you personally, where you're from, where do you live now, what do you do? It's sort of a snapshot so that we get into when we get into the substantive stuff. Not that that's not substantive, but it's just not aligned with our season 2. So if you could tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day, that would be awesome.
For sure. My name is Randy Anderson. I grew up in eastern Washington State and then went to college in Southern California at a small liberal arts college in Orange County called Chapman University. And I studied theater there and spent a couple of years in Los Angeles after that, trying to get into the movie business, and decided that really my passion was with theater, live theater, and the place for that was in New York. So I moved to New York and began sort of working my way into the theater world here. But then, as you know, most people in the entertainment industry know, you have to have a day job. So I took on a day job at a bank. So I became a banker for a while. Because that became, basically what I would do all the time. And it took over my life, and I had to find a way to sort of keep my theatrical life alive. So I started a theater company. So I was running a theater company downtown in Lower Manhattan while I was, working as a banker, in Midtown Manhattan. And so I had this like bifurcated life that was really awesome and really exciting. And we can talk a little bit more about that when we get into it. But now I've sort of melded my love of theater and my business skills into working at a labor union. So I work for a labor union that represents directors and choreographers in the theater, called Stage Directors and Choreographers. And I'm the deputy director there. So I've sort of been there for almost 20 years, worked my way up, through the ranks, and now number 2 at the organization, sort of navigating and guiding the work and protecting our members. So that's I think that's the quick and dirty.
The quick and dirty that is probably so full. I assume your plate is pretty heavy at most times. Is that a fair assumption?
It is, and I think that's something that I've and I'm going to be full disclosure. I am using this podcast to relaunch my passion endeavor, because my life has gotten so full at my job and I've become so successful that I've sort of stalled on my creative writing endeavors. And I think this was a sign. This podcast told me, Randy, get back to it. So this morning I was writing down my list of sort of creating my writing schedule, which is like absolutely imperative, I think, for anybody who's chasing a passion, outside of their day-to-day lives, is you have to schedule that time. Mm-hmm. You have to ahead of time, you lay it out and then show up, because we all put things in our calendars, like for business meetings, and you have to take the kid to the dentist, you have to do this, and we do those things. And I think, our passion projects need to follow the same thing. You got to put it in your calendar, then show up and do it.
At what point in this whole process did you figure out that your passion is to be a writer?
So when I was running the theater company, I was producing, I was directing, I was acting, I was writing, I was doing all of these things. But the part of it that I really enjoyed the most was writing, was creating stories. And I realized that my, really what I loved about the theater was telling stories. And to do that sort of not professionally on the side takes a lot of time, takes a lot of coordination, takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of space. Making theater is really hard. And I realized, well, what's feeding my soul here is telling these stories and writing. And I don't actually need other people. I don't need a space. I don't really need a lot of money. I can do this myself in my room. And so then I said, let me take a pivot. I'm getting my theatrical juices now from my day job and sort of getting my hit of theater work there. So let me pivot and start writing sort of novel forms. And so that's what led me to my first novel, On Making Off, which, as they always say, write what you know. I thought my first book should definitely be some sort of a memoir, so that I can really talk about what I know and learn the craft and skill of telling long form stories.
Oh, cool. So since then, for those of us who are not familiar, you wrote one book. What else is part of your repertoire here? What else? Give us your resume, I guess.
Okay.
Promote. Come on.
Promote. So I wrote the first book, On Making Off, Misadventures Off Broadway, which is, like I said, a memoir of sort of those years in my life working in Lower Manhattan. Then I wrote another sort of a novel called Careful, which was slightly based on personal experiences, but then largely fictionalized. And so in that novel, I aimed to still write what I know. So I would set it someplace that I had an intimate relationship with, and characters that I sort of were familiar with, but then create a dramatic arc, and sort of start to implement and learn the skills of telling a story in that manner. So then from that point, I said, let me write something that, I've had this crazy idea, so let me write a genre fiction book. So I wrote Time Phantom, which is a series. And so I put this, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to get into this series, and I want to write a bunch of books and tell a really long story to blow it out a bit more. So I've written Time Phantom 1, Amsterdam, and Time Phantom 2, which is set in Copenhagen, and I'm halfway through Time Phantom 3, which is set in New York. Which should be the end of the trilogy. I've got a lot of reviewers, particularly in Mexico. For some reason, I've got a Mexican audience who are really, really excited to read this third book. They're like, and I've got this one doctor in Mexico City who emails me every now and then. He's like, so Randy, what are you doing? What's going on? And I'm like, sorry, I'm so sorry.
You slacker.
I know. And so then I think where the ship hit the iceberg was 2016, and I was in the middle of doing Time Phantom 3, and 2016 happened and all the things that happened, and I thought, let me pause here and let me throw something at the wall really quick. So I wrote Divisible, which is a political novella, taking three stories and interweaving them and sort of imagining what our country would look like if there was post-Civil War. But I created three countries. So like we kind of got the blue country, the red country, and then a whole bunch of sort of terrorists who take over this small section of Colorado where all of the missile silos are. And they sort of grab hold of a whole bunch of nukes. And they basically tell both sides, if you guys continue fighting, we're going to blow you all up. And so they create peace, and then the two sides have to figure out how to live in their two different countries. So and I wrote that and I put that out, like I wrote it in a month. I mean, right after the election, I wrote it in a month. I got it copy edited and I had it out just shortly after the inauguration. The great story about that, I'm rambling here, but the great story about that is that, Facebook was still really kind of, not in its infancy, but it was sort of its mid-peak, I think, before it started to really sour. And I did a lot of ads on Facebook. And, I'm center left. And the book is definitely center left, though it's I feel like it's kind of fair, but it's not fair if you're anywhere to the right. And the algorithms in Facebook drove this book to the Trumpers and MAGA, and so they started buying the book. And you read the reviews, it's hysterical. They're like, the best thing about this book was I had something to burn. They get so mad. It sold terribly. The reviews are awful. And it's a really great book.
Wow.
But
it just has a certain audience.
Yes, exactly. And not the one the algorithms send you to. So,
wow. That's wild. So in this whole process, you've talked about publishing and reviews. I mean, that's a lot of stuff right there. Are you self-published? Are you published through one specific publisher? Like, can you kind of talk us through, like, if somebody's listening that's interested in trying to do this themselves, like, is it one of those things where it's like, oh, you just call up a publisher? I know it's not. Can you kind of talk us through your part of that process?
Yes, and I'm gonna start this process by saying that, as my husband reminds me on a constant basis, I'm not a patient person. Patience is not a virtue I possess at all. So I began with my first, not with my novel or my memoir, my first book, my second book, Careful. I really started to try to market it and try to write query letters and get it into agents' hands or publishers' hands, and in that process, it's slow. It's you get a lot of rejection letters, and I had actually hired a developmental editor who worked for the Big Four, but she's independent now, and so I paid her a whole bunch of money to read this manuscript and sit down with me and sort of tell me what's wrong with it, what I should do with it. She completely upended the whole thing. She basically said, you need to change this and swap this. It sounds big, it kind of is, but I think you can do it and it'll make a better book. And she was right, and it was a really wonderful experience. And after I kind of got through that experience, I had run out of patience on trying to get an agent to do it, so I self-published it again.
Okay.
But then the book that I really pushed and tried to get an agent to represent was Time Phantom, because genre fiction sells better, it's more attractive to publishers, and so that one I sent out a lot of queries. I got some bites, I sent out some sample chapters, and I even did this thing which was really fun and kind of weird. It was called a pitch slam, and it was basically like speed dating for agents. And you go into this hotel ballroom, and like all these agents are sitting at the tables, and everyone just runs, and you've got like 60 seconds with each agent. You got, and then you like go to the next one. But I got a couple of really good referrals there, so I was able to like talk to a few agents, and they read some of my stuff, and they liked it, but they didn't, they said maybe not for me quite yet, not sure. So then I ran out of patience on that and then self-published. And then I just decided that's just going to be the route I'm going to go. I'm just going to keep self-publishing because it's fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I know from very little experience on the tertiary side, but like it's a very cutthroat thing. So I want to make sure that people understand, if they're listening to this, is like he has just gone through the gauntlet in describing of what it actually takes to do it. And you, Randy, because I think you're on the other side, the successful side, you make it sound pretty easy. It's not easy at all. It's like really, really challenging. And I know a lot of people who have tried, have failed, have been broken by it. So it's kind of cool to see somebody who's done it so many different times and with such success here. Like this is the norm. Like, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of work to do it. It takes obviously a serious passion for it too, because I'm sure there are numerous times, as with anything, especially in the dramatic arts, it's like, well, rejection's part of it, right? So you obviously, clearly, your love for it helps drive you through it, I would assume, yeah?
Yeah, and I think that there's, the self-publishing world has really cracked open, the accessibility and availability for amateur writers to sort of move into that space. But there's a caution there, because there's a lot of it's flooded the market. There's a lot of garbage. There's even like a publishing company in Europe that's using AI to just like churn out a whole bunch of stuff, right? Garbage. But I think one of the things that I realized that I was going to focus my time and energy on was making the product good. So spending money, hiring copy editors, spending money, developmental editors, spending money to get people to make nice graphics for your, and I see it as employing other artists, right? Like, so my first book, I had a cartoonist, do a cartoon, hired him to make a really beautiful cartoon cover. And so it's just important to create quality. I think that's, if you don't have the patience like me to continue to knock on doors and be told no, and you want to go the self-publishing route, my sort of recommendation would be to spend the time that you would have been knocking on doors making sure that the product you're creating, the writing that you're going to put out there, is as best as it possibly can be.
And then, I mean, I would imagine in your inner circle, you mentioned your husband, like how do you involve those folks in, like, do you treat them like, hey, you got to read this and make sure it's good? Like, do you have like a litmus test? Do you involve others before that you're not employing, in terms of like, will you read this and see if it resonates at all? Like, or are you more of a lone wolf there and just put it out there?
No, I love to get feedback from folks. I'll send my mom chapters and she'll look at things. But I always say, this is just a draft, so please don't get caught up on misspellings and typos, and they just move through it. Read as fast as you can and don't worry about that, because I just want you to tell me if it's engaging, if you don't understand something, if it's so I get kind of. So yeah, I utilize my husband. He reads drafts. My mother, friends. I sort of toss it out there, and then when it's time to really tighten it up and sort of get things looking clean, that's when I bring in somebody that I'm paying. Which that relationship helps, because then they're going to be honest with you, right? I mean, our loved ones we love them for a reason, and they love us for a reason, and they can say they're going to be honest, but they're going to soften things a little. And I want someone to be like, you know what, you got to stop using semicolons, Randy. It's garbage. It doesn't work. It doesn't what's your addiction to semicolons? I don't know. They look cute. It's like a wink, I like that little wink.
Oh, that's amazing. As an English major, I can completely relate. So that's cool. That's great. It's great that you have that support system, but also the limitations of it. Like you said, I think we've even experienced in this podcast. Everybody says Tim's so great, and then we hire somebody that says, hey.
Tim is great.
I have no comment. No, it's not true. Randy, I'm like soaking all this in, and I'm just so incredibly impressed with what you've done. I want to go back to the early stages real quickly, if that's okay. I don't think I knew that story necessarily, how you kind of, you were going into this theater, like trying to really make this work, and sort of discovered through the process that there was another sort of avenue for you to continue to feed that part of you, but it didn't, it aligned with what you needed at that time by just writing and being with the pen and paper, the computer and whatnot. And that's very courageous in so many ways to be able to take that on and to move in that direction. Can you speak a little bit more, however, about the training that you received? I mean, did you, in those early stages, before you actually started to really dive into it, did you take classes? Did you consult with people who, were you doing online searching and whatnot? I mean, what sort of coaching did you need when you were just starting this process?
As a writer,
Yeah.
had coffee with some friends who were in the business, who were writers. But really, I didn't take any classes. I actually applied for graduate school and got into a creative writing graduate program, but realized, I'm going to spend a lot of time and money for, a degree that really isn't going to make me any money. So what I did, Tim, really was I started reading in a very different way. And I think that's, every writer, will tell you that's how you get better, is you read. So I just started picking up books and started reading books that I thought would be like a book I'd want to write, or books that were on writing. Read Stephen King's book, which is basically I think the best training wheels guide to how to write that there is. I've done the Artist's Way a couple of times now, which is also really helpful. And one of the sort of basic tenets of that book is to write every day. Your morning pages are, sort of the meditation and the way to do it. So between just reading and just writing, and then having conversations and letting people read my work and learning from what they say about it, I think that was it. Yeah. So I didn't do any sort of adventurous, real training.
Do you have any favorite writers? Like if an author were to put something out right now, that you'd rush to buy, do you have any of those folks?
John Boyne. He's fantastic. And The Heart's Invisible Furies is in my top 10 of all time. I mean, I think I was really inspired by Jeffrey Eugenides and Barbara Kingsolver, sort of in my late 20s, early 30s. They were writing these sort of opuses that were just, you couldn't put down, right? They were really long books that had, spanned large periods of time, and it was so impressive. But then once I got into John Boyne, all of his characters are so interesting and so fun. And he started to play with his readers too, which I think is a joy. He starts to put pieces of characters from other novels that have no relation, but then there they are. You say, oh, this is that famous, the famous author mom who's like really crazy, and she just shows up in all these different places. And he did a sequel, not a sequel, but like an addition to Boy in the Striped Pajamas, where one of the women who lived on she was a Nazi family. She goes hiding. It was just a fantastic book. There was a separate story that was connected very tangentially to another one of his novels. So he's a joy to read.
That's great. You can find inspiration like that. It's even maybe just a little bit different than what you actually write. You know what I mean? It's like
So Randy, as life goes, right, and in all things, you have probably, in pursuing your passion, bumped up against obstacles. Whether it be like, just stuck in the middle of a story and can't find your way through, or can you share some of the obstacles that you've experienced as an author and the tools or what you've done to get through those?
Yes, I think that's a great question. And now I have two sort of really good examples. And the first one sort of relates to my novel Careful, in which I had written, it was a third or fourth draft by the time I sat down and gave it to this developmental editor to read. And the framing device of the story was, in my fifth draft, was a mother visiting her son, her adult son, in the hospital as he's dying. And then he begins to tell her the story of this adventure that he had when he was 16. And so the mom goes to his bedside in the hospital, and then, you know, throughout their evening, you know, we bounce back and forth, and then we jump into like the world that he's telling, and then jump back. And the developmental editor is like, okay, so I think the story is really great, but your framing device is backwards. And I'm like, what do you mean backwards? She's like, well, I don't think it's believable that this guy, this, you know, healthy 40-year-old man is dying. And nobody wants to read that, Randy. I'm like, what do you mean nobody wants to read that? That's like your main audience here is middle-aged women, is moms, right? So they don't want to read a book about their son dying. That's awful. You should make her die and have the son visit her. And I'm like, but that means I have to like rewrite. She's like, yeah, you have to rewrite a lot. So I sort of had to pause for a second. But I mean, I learned so much from that simple conversation, right? Because she told me who my audience was. I didn't think about that at first. I didn't have any conception of like who I was writing this for, right? And she's like, this is who it's for. So then that changed everything. But then the act of having to rewrite 30% of the book backwards was at first a little heartbreaking, and then once I got into it, I realized I'm writing it faster because I already kind of know the story, and I'm writing it better. So then I took myself a little bit slower, and then I realized the gift that sort of brought me. And I say that was the first time that happened, and then the second time that this happened, I was in the middle of my Time Phantom 3, in which I had like sort of mapped out the whole thing, you know, because I'm a half pantser, half plotter. We can go into what that means in a second, but I had plotted out the entire third book, and I drafted probably about 300 pages, and realized, no, that's wrong. And because I had had that previous experience, knowing what I knew, I was like, yeah, I can let that go. Just let 300 pages go, save it, of course, and put it someplace else. But then just not like to just say that's the wrong. I did it wrong. This is not right, and I've got to go back and do it again. There's something freeing about it and kind of exciting. But yeah, to sit there and know that you need to rewrite something, you just can't be afraid of that, and you just and see it as a gift.
For those of you who are not in the writing realm, and I'm kind of on the fringes of it myself, folks, what he's talking about, writing is rewriting, and the fact that he just said that with a smile on his face, that's how you know that he's an actual writer. Because like quote unquote normal people don't smile through throwing away 300 pages of hard work. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's cool.
Well, it's just joyous, right? I mean, that's I think for me, that's why this is the passion of mine, which I love doing it, because the actual act of writing is fun for me. It's you know, sometimes exercising is fun for people. Sometimes writing is fun. I when I'm really in it, I mean, it's just wonderful. We've been given this one life. We get to have experiences, and as a writer, when you get to sit in a room, you get to have all these experiences that you're not really going to have, but you get to have them in your head. And who cares? Because when I'm 95 years old and I'm like have dementia, what's in my head is the only thing that matters anyway. So I'm going to relive these things and think it's real. Like, oh my God, I traveled through time when I was like 50 years old in Amsterdam.
You know,
amazing.
You're playing a serious long game here, Randy. That's really impressive.
Randy, what do you need in terms of like disciplining yourself to be able to be creative? What steps do you take, or how do you pull that off?
I mean, these are well written about. It is space and time. I mean, you just have to set the time aside, and then you have to create a space that is comfortable, that you can work in. And I've actually gone so far, you know, in like once or twice a year. I haven't done it in a while, but go on a writing retreat. I set a week. I take a week's vacation. I rent one of my first places that I did it at, and I kept going back to it, was a geodome in Colorado. Just, you know, to drive up in the hills, way up in the hills. I'd go there in the fall. There was no TV. There was no anything else. And it was like a round house, and I just sat there for a week and just wrote. And it was awesome, and make steak dinners and then write. And you know, it was a lovely experience. And I think those writing retreats helped me kick something off, and then I create a really, you know, strict schedule about it. But then I think it's just, which is what I'm doing now. I was putting together my schedule this morning. You know, it's 30 minutes a day. If you could do 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, then, next thing you know, after a couple of months, you've got something, there. I think people, it's just like exercise. I mean, if you do 20 crunches a day, you're going to have a six-pack in a year. I mean, if you do 30 minutes of writing, 5 days a week, you're going to have a novel at the end of the year. So six-pack, novel, what do you want?
Why not both? On those retreats, did you go completely alone?
Yes, yeah, it's really important, and I've learned, because I've gone to Puerto Rico. I did Old Town Puerto Rico, which was great because I was kind of wanted I wanted to be warm, and I wanted sort of an old town, old world feel. And I've gone to Mexico. There are artists Colony Town. I forget the name of it. Just outside of Mexico City. Which is great. I think going to some places are like, exotic places is fun because you get a little vacation too, but it just can't be too exotic, because then on your walks, then I'm like, oh wait, I want to do this. That looks cool. And then you start getting distracted. So I found that the mountains, a cabin in the mountains or a geodome in the mountains is probably the best.
Right on. That's cool.
That is cool. I have another question, Randy. How do you know when you're done with a novel?
I don't think you're ever done. And I think that's, which is also the glory of self-publishing, right? Is that, hey, well, if I want to fix that, I can fix it. And you just upload the new draft. Nobody will be the wiser. But I think when I know when it's time to stop, when you go through, because so I guess when I'm doing rewrites, when I'm in sort of the final draft, but then I'm now doing sort of small rewrites, and I'll just read from the beginning to the end. If I read from the beginning to the end, the number of changes that I make start to shrink. So I think probably I think I'm done when I've only made 200 changes in a novel throughout the book. I think once I get down to that, because when you first start doing those sort of I guess read-throughs, I call them, because I'm from the theater, but reading through from the beginning to end, I'm just making I'm changing sentences, boom, boom, but you're just changing stuff constantly. So you'll have 1,000, 1,500 different little changes that you've made, and then the next time it's smaller, next time it's smaller, next time it's smaller. That's after you've sort of crafted everything. But yeah, so that's a hard question, because I don't really know if you can be done, but I stop when those changes become few enough that I'm like, okay, that's probably time to move on to the next thing.
That's great advice. Randy, we have an impact question that we ask all guests. Name one person or experience that has had a profound impact on the individual you are today.
Everything? What? That's so big.
It can be, that's a big question. It can be about, yes, who you are, or it could be about, how you have an individual or experience that has helped support your pursuit of your passion as an author and as a creative person.
Well, I've always been a creative self-starter. That's just kind of been my, it's been in my DNA since I was a child, right? So that piece of it hasn't been challenging. What's been challenging? Gosh, there's I had a girlfriend. Yes, I had a girlfriend. I had a girlfriend in college who went to a tarot reader. This is going to sound so weird. She went to a tarot reader when we were dating, or after we were dating, maybe after I came out. I'm not sure. We were still friends after we broke up, because she got the memo. She knew it before I did. But she went to a tarot card reader, and they told her that that somebody really important and special in her life was going to be a writer, and she told that to me, and I was still pursuing the theater thing. I was like, oh, that's really great. She's like, no, Randy, you're going to be a writer. You should be a writer. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm 21 years old. Okay, great. Move on with my life, and oddly enough, 2 decades later or whatever, when I sort of wanted to make this shift, I was like, oh, remember that time when Aaron's tarot card reader said I'd be a writer? I think that's right. So it's made up, but that
Crazy.
That actually, it's weird. Yeah, that I would think about that so many years later that. So I guess that was impactful.
Wow, it was literally in the cards, Randy.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's literally in the cards. Yeah.
Wow.
Well done.
the tarot card thing, like you can have your opinions about it, whatever. Like it's not my place, but like, do you think that's the craziest thing that's happened to you as a writer, or like centered around your passion, or is there something that can top it?
Well, I mean, the thing with being a writer is that crazy things don't happen to you, right? They happen in the books, and that's the act of writing is a very quiet pursuit. So I'd love to be able to tell you a story of writing in some cafe somewhere and like a bomb goes off and it I almost die and then I'm running down the street and my hair's on fire and I escape. I mean that's not going to happen.
Sure.
So you're influenced by these things, but that's one of the things when I wrote my first book on making off Misadventures off Broadway, it's chock-a-block full of crazy things that happened as a performer and as trying to run a theater company, because I was by day putting a suit and a tie on, and then by night I was doing a production of Theodora, She-Bitch of Byzantium, literally putting on press-on nails on the subway for a 10:30 midnight performance where I play Theodora. I was doing an off-Broadway show called Ronnie Larson's All-Male Peep Show, in which a very famous porn star named Jeff Stryker was the celebrity star of the show, and he thought it was funny. There's a moment in the show where he takes his manhood out and shows it for the audience, and he thought it was going to be really funny to throw it across my face on stage, because it's watch that. So that book, so this book is my first book is chock-a-block full of these crazy things that actually happened as you're running around downtown, and we experimenting with drugs and doing goofy things, and we would do a show called Do It, which was in a basement theater in the East Village, and we didn't charge admission for it. It was about the Yippie movement, and so it was sort of very politically charged. And I would advertise for it by I made these posters, and I made a protest sign, and the picture was of a woman holding her hand out, and she's topless, but but the graphic is covering up her nipples, so you don't get it's not lewd, but it's suggestive. And I would just walk around the city with this just walking through, and we would tell people from the street, come and see this show, and we'd have these jugs of Carlo Rossini wine, that really cheap, awful wine that they give you at those all you can eat Italian restaurants, and we would feed everybody all this wine, get the audience knockered out of their heads, and then do this really great show, and then pass the hat around. We made more money on that show than any other show I ever did.
That might be, well, I know it is for this show, but that might be top 10 most New York stories I've ever heard.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
Awesome. That's really
that
cool.
is so funny.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to
Randy.
read goofy stories like that, on Making Off, Misadventures off Broadway, it's basically just one chapter after the next of these insane, goofy things.
That's really cool. So that's a good segue, though. So if folks are listening to this and they want to find your various books, what's the best way to do that?
They're all on Amazon. You can buy them in print versions. You can buy them on the Kindle version. There's an Audible version of Divisible, which we recorded with a full cast of people, and that's a short novella that's that's pretty well done. And there's also an audio version of Careful. I don't have the audio versions of the Time Phantom books yet, because I think I'm going to finish the third one and then do all of them at the same time. But that's the only book that people buy, and it continues to sell. But it's people like the genre fiction more than anything else, and it's identifiable. So
I read Careful, and it's just a phenomenal book. I'm kind of embarrassed, Randy, that I haven't read more, and I need to do that. But I was just so incredibly impressed with what you did with Careful and how you handled. A really, it's a tough read, but it was beautiful. And
thank you.
Yeah, no, I really can strongly endorse that novel and encourage people to check that one out. And just based off my knowledge of who Randy is and of his skill, I would say his other stuff is probably pretty good as well.
That's great to hear. Thank you. I'm most proud of. That's the book that I'm most proud of. I mean, I think Careful is actually sort of crafted in a way I think is the genre stuff is the genre stuff, and it sort of needs to do what it does, and that's sort of what it does. It's kind of got a purpose to it. But Careful has a special place because I think I spent a lot of time toiling over each sentence in a way that I wouldn't with Time Phantom.
Very cool. Well, we'll put links and everything in the show notes so that people can find it with a click a little easier. But that's really, thank you for sharing that. I always want to make sure people can actually find good content. So thank you.
Thank you.
No, I just want to say, Trav, for the past like 6 or 7 years, I've been working on a novel. And one thing that Randy didn't mention today was that he also serves as a mentor to young fools like myself who are trying to find their way through that space. And I'm just incredibly grateful for, Randy's helped me tremendously just kind of think about the process and dive into it, and has offered coaching and support that has been instrumental. And it's a really tricky space to be. And Trev, you know this as well through your creative outlets and through your work and through your personal life. So there's a lot of vulnerability,
Sure.
a lot of time and sometimes a lot of pain that goes into this process. It can be excruciating. I've met a lot of people who have said, like, don't do this. It is too hard, right? I mean, really, which is very interesting. I love the way that you're framing it, Randy. You approach it with such joy. It energizes you clearly. The creative process energizes you, and that really, speaks volumes to who you are. But I just, you also serve the role of a mentor and have been incredibly good to me. And I just want to express my gratitude for that as well.
Well, thank you. I've loved talking, as I've told you many times in our discussions. I love talking about the work. I love talking about making the work. And I think one of the things that one of the gifts that I was given, having gone through the performing arts arena, is that I'm not as precious with the work. And I think writers who haven't had the experience of standing on stage and nobody laughing at your joke, or standing on stage and not really clapping or waiting for that long. I mean, there's so many times where you are rejected in real time by a whole bunch of people on stage, and writers don't get that experience. But so then when they experience rejection, on a slower pace or more removed, it's devastating to them. And I think one of the things that I want to encourage writers to do is, if you don't love doing it, then you really shouldn't do it at all. You just, life is too short to do things we don't love doing, especially if it's not, okay, so you have to like work money, so you maybe you don't love your job as much, but this is something you have to love doing, and you also can't be as precious with it. You've got to. People aren't going to like it, and not everybody's going to like everything, and that's okay. It's great. Write a book with a political theme and give it to the people that I learned really fast. I'm like, wow, this sucks.
It let Facebook do its thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's something about that process too that's not only humbling, but it also makes you that much stronger, I think, in your next endeavor. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, it's similar to exercise. It's funny you've made that analogy a few times. It's like, okay, well, the first mile that you ever run is going to suck. It's going to be really hard.
Yes.
And, your feet and everything else are going to tell you how hard it is. But the more you get through it, the better you get at it. And, then you can find some more joy in it. And, I think too, it shows how seasoned you are as a creative in general when you can laugh about the response that you get. Sometimes it's not so positive. that takes a bit of a veteran voice, you know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
And I'm going to quote Shakespeare here, but in Julius Caesar, one of the lines is offend, disturb, and be remembered. Right. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's, I don't think you should always offend and disturb, but we remember these things that they're bad that come at us, and,
Sure.
that's okay. That's okay. You got to let that happen.
Totally. Yeah. And if you sparked a nerve, you sparked a nerve. You know what I mean? Right. Like, as a writer, it's like, hey, you actually got a reaction. That's something.
Yep, that's right. Because there's that book that's out right now that everybody's reading. My mom just posted it in the family chat. She's like, it's a combination of Harry Potter and Game of Thrones and 50 Shades of Grey, but more 50 Shades of Grey. And it's like the biggest selling book right now. And so she puts this in the family chat, and suddenly the family chat is starting to match up, like, well, who at Harry Potter World would hook up with somebody from, so, and there's kids on this chat. I mean, come on, Grandma.
Keep it clean, Grandma.
Dumbledore and, Mr. Snow. I mean, no.
Oh, that's funny. That's great. Oh man. Well, Randy, thank you so much for sharing all this. Like I said, we'll put everything from your work in the show notes so that people can find you.
Fantastic.
This has been it's actually very inspiring in a lot of ways. So thank you very much for being so open and candid with your experience and your talent.
Absolutely. And as I said, I'm using you. You have inspired me to get back at my schedule and start working it. So I'll put a little dedication in Time Phantom 3 to Trav and Tim.
Ooh,
You got me going. I just
right.
said it. I said it out loud. It's going to happen.
It's got to happen.
This
now.
is being recorded. Yeah, we're going to come after you if we don't find it in that book.
Well, right on.
Oh,
Thanks
this is
again.
awesome. Randy, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely. Cool.
All right, Randy Anderson, thank you again for coming in. I'm inspired personally. I know you made a few jokes about us getting you in line, but I think the feeling was mutual. That was very cool. Thank you for all your insights, and I could feel your passion. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think I found that to be very interesting. I mean, just what he's produced, right? I mean, it's so staggering, and to be consistent in that is
right.
It's really phenomenal. I mean, that was one of the real big takeaways for me was his sharing about needing structure, right? Like really trying to incorporate the time and space for that. It's so necessary to be able to pull something like that off.
Totally, absolutely.
So I wish all the people out there who are looking to engage in that the time to really focus in. It's not easy.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's definitely not. And it should not be taken lightly at all. But his candor was very much appreciated. So
yeah, I agree.
All right, Tim. There we go, man. Another episode in the can. What do you think?
I don't know, Trav. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to think, but as long as our moms are happy, I'm happy.
That's what we strive for every day.
That's it. They did a lot for us. We owe it to them.
There you go. We'll give them a podcast. I'm sure that's not what they had in mind.
Yeah. I'm sure this is bringing them lots of joy. So, all right, everybody, stay safe, stay healthy.
Yes, indeed. Look for something awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tim.
Take care. See ya.
Tim and Travis on the mic, talking life and what's it like. Middle age, it's quite the ride. Finding joy and chasing pride. Career dreams and daily grind. Funny moments that we find. Letting go of yesterday, making paths along the way. Middle age. Middle-aged mayhem breaking free, finding out who we can be, laughing, learning all the time. Tim and Travis in their prime. Every step a brand new plan, older, wiser, still we stand. Navigating through the years, sharing stories, laughs and cheers. Free, finding out who we can be, laughing, learning all the time. Tim and Travis in their prime. Every step a brand new plan, older, wiser, still we stand. Navigating through the years, sharing stories, laughs and cheers. Middle age, enjoying the fun, middle age has just begun. Tim and Travis lead the way, every episode will slay.
No, you could be like, Tim, I'm sorry.
I would like that.
You'd be okay with that?
If you have anything personal you'd like to bring up with me, this is a good time to do it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's a new one.
Off to a great start.
Can I share one more thing? It'll only take me 45 minutes. I think I need an afternoon cup of tea. All right, that was take one. All right, Trav, hit record.